Hi, my name is Mike Short, and welcome to my credit repair workshop. This workshop was originally developed while I was working at a shelter for families experiencing homelessness. Certainly, this is a barrier to being rehoused. Your credit score is really important, of course, to landlords. So this was something that we developed immediately for the families there. However, this workshop could be used by anybody who wants to just understand generally what credit is, how your credit score is generated, and then finally how to repair it over the long term. So many of us have had or have problems with our credit. In fact, around a third of all Americans have poor or bad credit. The fact is, you can repair your credit yourself with just a little bit of help. So a little bit of history. In 2003, the federal government enacted a law requiring that the three major credit bureaus provide free credit reports to everyone each year. This was a really big deal. This is powerful information that you need to have access to throughout your life. What we're going to do with this workshop is open up the conversation. We're going to put credit on the front page of our lives and get talking. Hiding from the realities of your credit and your credit score will hurt your financial future more than you may know. Credit is involved in so many aspects of our lives. So this slide here is just an example of the three credit bureaus. These are essentially companies, and I'll tell you a little bit about them. So Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion each function in the same way, but each can have very different information about you. Essentially, these are huge companies that hold onto your data and produce reports when you go to get a car, a cell phone, home, or another loan. When you buy a car at a dealership, they will offer you a loan for a portion of the car. When they give you this loan, they provide you with an interest rate. The interest rate is based on your credit score. The cell phone company works in a similar way. They will also pull your credit score to determine if they can give you a phone. Your score will determine if you have to pay a deposit towards your phone. The interesting thing is that the car dealership and the cell phone store can get vastly different information about you. The car dealership may only get your TransUnion credit score, which determines your score based solely on your TransUnion data. The cell phone store might pull an Equifax credit score, etc., etc. By making sure that all three bureaus have accurate and updated information on you, you can ensure wherever you go to seek credit or loans, you'll be getting the best interest rate possible. So, the three bureaus. Your credit report and score. So your credit report and score are based on the information these bureaus hold, as we've discussed. There are 5 factors that determine the score: your payment history, how much money you owe versus how much credit is available to you, the length of your credit history, any negative accounts or collection accounts, and the variety of credit that you hold. That's examples would be credit cards, car loans, department store cards, etc. The good news is you can repair your credit in about 2 years from when all of your negative accounts are settled. By following some simple steps and diligently pulling your credit reports every 6 months, you can vastly improve your credit. Initially, you shouldn't pay too much attention to your credit score. Paying attention to your credit reports is much more important. By disputing negative and old items, and by paying off or negotiating your old debt as quickly as possible, you'll be on your way to good credit in no time. So these are the 7 steps to credit freedom. Step number 1. You want to head over to annualcreditreport.com and obtain your 3 credit reports. Federal law entitles you to 1 free report from each credit bureau annually. There's some important tips here. You might consider not using your current phone number. You might consider not using your current address. You should take any necessary steps to obtain these 3 reports in full, though. This may include providing additional information by writing to the bureaus. So, just an aside here, have any of you ever had any collection calls? Well, I assume, many of you have. And what was that experience like? Collection agencies themselves have a singular purpose: to get you to pay them whatever you can that day. They are typically not interested in calling you back in a couple days or working with you on a personal level. The staff are trained to sometimes intimidate people. By providing your current phone number and current address when you seek out credit reports, you are actually providing that information to the 3 credit bureaus in real time. A message will go out to all interested parties that person XYZ has just updated their phone and address. You can certainly expect anyone you owe money to use that information to try to collect those debts. By not providing your most current information, you can protect yourself and your family from those types of aggressive debt collection practices. Reviewing your reports. So, the first step to determine where you are with your credit history is to get familiar with how these reports are set up. There are sections in the reports: personal information, public records, creditor information, adverse negative items, accounts in good standing, and credit inquiries. Understanding how a credit report is set up takes a bit of time. I've included a handout in the materials called How to Read and Understand Your Credit Report. After you pull your own reports, spend some time with this document until you understand where you stand on each section of the report. So, make note of any negative items on a piece of paper. Take notes each time you call and obtain new information from a creditor. You're going to want to call and investigate the items by using the internet or any other numbers provided. You should consider hiding your number by using *67 when calling these creditors. You want to make note of any incorrect or suspicious items. Fraud and identity theft can happen, but it is quite rare. By reviewing your credit reports regularly, you can protect yourself. Sometimes a creditor's phone number will be listed on the report, but many times it won't be. So go ahead and use an internet search to find that number. Many times, things at first will appear incorrect, and you can't remember exactly where that information came from. But later, after doing some investigating, you may remember the circumstances of that item. Again, fraud and identity theft are relatively uncommon, so by doing a little bit of due diligence, you can usually figure out what each item on your credit report is. So the third step is to dispute everything that's negative. Write a letter to each bureau disputing the existence of any negative items. I prefer this method. However, you can also do this online, and some of the agencies now, bureaus now, are forcing you to do this online only. You're going to want to ask for the method of verification. So there is an attachment, a handout that's included that talks a little bit about method of verification. This essentially makes the creditor prove that the debt actually exists. Disputing anything you don't remember, and if they don't have documentation to back up the debt, they'll be forced to remove it from your report. You're going to want to dispute anything older than 7 years. These items should automatically be removed, but you may need to request that it be removed from your credit report. Do this in writing as well. You're going to want to keep a folder with all of this information. Send documentation backing up your claims if you can. This would include copies of your credit report with relevant sections highlighted. So contacting the creditors themselves, there's a couple different options that you have when you have a debt. You can negotiate with them, you can go into a counseling or a payment plan, or you can just pay it. This is by far the most stressful part of the process. You have the option of negotiating your debt, entering into a credit counseling agreement, or just paying it. Collection agencies exist for one reason: to collect money. Be prepared to react calmly to aggressive tactics. Don't ever pay a debt with a personal check. This gives the creditor access to your bank routing and account number. So, is this a large debt that they will sue you for is a question that comes up a lot. A good rule of thumb is that anything under $1,000 they probably won't sue you for, but anything over $3,000 they probably will sue you for. When dealing with larger debts, I would recommend obtaining free legal help prior to contacting those creditors. Again, I'm not an attorney, so anybody with significant debt, they should really be contacting free lawyers in the town or city where they live. Once you make contact regarding a large debt, a number of things can happen, including wage garnishment. These larger debts, again, are best handled by an attorney. So what is negotiating or settling? So negotiating is basically the process of negotiating to pay off a debt by agreeing to pay 50 or 75% of the debt. So what has happened is that the original creditor that lent you the money essentially sold your debt to a credit collection agency for pennies on the dollar. So in the end, if they've been having trouble getting that money back from you, they may be happy to take 50% of that debt as a full repayment of the debt. This will settle the debt once and for all. Why is negotiating or settling a good idea? Well, negotiating and settling is a good idea when an item is already in negative territory and you haven't paid towards it in a while. That's usually about 6 months. Remember, the goal is to start fresh, so by settling or removing the negative items, you're starting on your path to good credit. Negotiation can be a fast way to accomplish those goals. When negotiating your debt, collection agencies will not have your best interest in mind. How do you protect yourself from that? Well, you have to get everything in writing. If a collection agency agrees to accept 50% of the money as a full repayment of the debt, you need to wait until you have that in writing before paying them any money. Have a trusted friend read that letter as well before making any kind of payment. So why is this so important? Well, when you pay a collection agency, the person on the phone can easily say, "Sure, we'll accept 50% of the debt," and instead just apply that to the total balance. You need proof to be able to send to the credit bureaus that they agreed to accept 50% as a full repayment of the debt. So then later, the credit bureaus, you'll be forcing them to actually list that as paid in full or settled as agreed. Remember, the collection agencies are not in charge of anything and are typically less than helpful after you have paid them. Your ability to prove in writing that a debt is settled, paid, or false in some way is critical to this entire process. So what is credit counseling? Well, credit counseling is the process of agreeing to start a payment plan on a debt that you owe. There's no need to hire a company to do this or to do negotiation, frankly, although there are some great nonprofit agencies that can help you with this. So why is credit counseling a good idea? So if a debt is not very old, so you haven't stopped making payments yet on it, you don't really have a lot of room for negotiation. So why would a company settle for less than the full amount if you've been paying on time? Beware of any for-profit negotiation and counseling companies that make big promises. These companies will be looking to make a profit off of you. They can also get you in serious trouble by not alerting you to possible risks of you being sued and eventually having your wages garnished. By entering into a formal credit counseling agreement with the creditor by yourself or through a reputable nonprofit, you can freeze the amount that you owe and stop the interest from building each month. You'll have a set amount to pay each month towards your debt. If you're struggling to continue to make your monthly payments, this can be a great tool. So let's slow down for a minute here. All right, are you prepared to pay the debt, or are you still just obtaining information? What is the plan? Remember, this is a long game. This is a multi-year process. Should you contact your creditors if you don't have any money to pay them? Probably not. So it's okay to wait, because now that you have the information, you can start to save and you can start to plan. Being patient is very important to this process. Repairing bad credit takes a few years. Focus on what you can do now. So bankruptcy. So this is a taboo term for a lot of people, but this can be an important option if you have a significant debt and no way to repay it. For an example, you've gone to credit counseling and they can't help you. Number two, you're unable to meet your monthly expenses. You may be experiencing homelessness. If you have no discernible assets, so no house and no car or anything like that. If you've had a major loss of income due to illness. 40% of the time, student loans are included successfully in bankruptcy proceedings. This is a little known fact. This was some research done by a graduate student back in 2011. So if you're in significant trouble and you have some massive student loans, sometimes bankruptcy can clear those, and a bankruptcy attorney can help you with that. Bankruptcy is just another tool in the toolbox of debt relief. There are two different types. One that will eliminate all of your debt, which is called Chapter 7, and one that is a structured, court-ordered repayment of your debt, also known as Chapter 13. Even student loans can be included in these proceedings. So people who successfully include student loans again in bankruptcy proceedings are, number one, less likely to be employed. So you're probably going to have to be unemployed. Number two, more likely to have a medical hardship, like, for instance, a kid who's dealing with a major medical illness to the point where you can't work. Number three, more likely to have lower annual incomes the year before they filed for bankruptcy. If you are experiencing homelessness, you definitely are a candidate for bankruptcy, and you'd definitely be a candidate for bankruptcy that may be able to eliminate your student loan debt. Obtaining an unlimited credit report service. So when you're working to repair your credit over the long term, you need to be able to see when things drop off of your report and when they don't. Many times a creditor will say, sure, we'll contact the bureaus to remove a negative item. You need to be able to continue to follow up to make sure it actually gets done. Again, this is why it's so important to get everything in writing before you pay anyone. Credit repair takes at least 2 years. At $15 a month, an unlimited credit report service costs about $360. This can be money very well spent. Don't be fooled by services that offer a credit score. You don't need that. You need full reports from all 3 bureaus. These report monitoring services change the way they do business all the time, so do your research and get help if you do need it. When your credit's repaired, you can taper down to pulling your report once a year for free. So credit scores, debunked. Sorry. So everybody wants to know their credit score. It's a complicated business, but we'll dive into it a little bit here. Your credit score varies depending on who pulls it and what bureaus that inquiry looks at. So let's talk about that and give some examples. There are 5 factors that determine your credit score: your payment history, the debt amounts and utilization, i.e. available credit. So if you've if you're at $19,000 out of $20,000, or if you're at $4,000 out of a $5,000 balance on a credit card, that looks negative, clearly. The length of your credit history. So how long have you had credit? How long have you been paying on time? The amount of collections, charge-offs, and other bad debts. And then the variety of lines of credit, i.e. credit cards, car loans, mortgages, installment accounts. So step number 6, understanding a credit score, continued. Things to remember. Having clean credit reports will not necessarily mean you have a good credit score. A young person fresh out of high school may not have any credit at all. That's not going to get you a good loan. You also need income to be a good candidate for a loan. Your debt to income ratio is a huge part of how they determine if you'll get a good loan or interest rate. So for now, just focus on cleaning your reports, stopping any kind of negative items, obtaining good income, and the last step of the process, building it back up. While we're here, let's try to dispel some of the pervasive rumors that circulate around your credit score. Many people say that credit inquiries will affect your credit. It's true, but they are only talking about a 2-point hit over a 6-month period. Out of a total of 850, that's hardly significant. People also talk about closing accounts and how that can be negative. Well, if you close an account, the on-time payment and late payments will still continue to affect your credit. Overall, the larger issue is the amount of credit that's available to you. So if that credit card had a $5,000 limit, that's $5,000 less that's available to you, and it can skew your utilization rate. Your utilization rate is a component of your credit score and is the amount of credit you are using compared to that of what you are offered. So closing an account very close to getting a loan could be a bad idea, but closing an account when you're in a long-term process of credit repair is certainly not that big of a deal. So starting to rebuild. So fixing your credit was only about half the battle. Now you need to begin to build your credit back up. If you've sworn off credit cards, you're in for some bad news. You actually need them. Remember, we talked about the 5 aspects of your credit: payment history, length of credit history, and variety of credit sources. These are 3 things you can start to work on now. First, you're going to want to establish 2 new credit cards. So head over to www.creditcards.com or any other of these sites and apply for a good, then a fair, then a bad credit card. Apply for the better ones first and work your way down. Is everybody familiar with what a bad credit card is? Alright, well, I'll give you an example here. So some banks have secure credit cards, and then they have bad credit cards, which essentially are $250 balance credit cards. You want to obtain 2 such cards and keep them in your house, not in your wallet. Put a coffee on each card once a week or once a month, and then put the card back in your house. You're going to want to obtain a department store card that you use once a month for one purchase. Set a reminder on your phone and print a calendar for your house of the due date for this card. Even better, pay off your credit card immediately after the purchase. By using these 3 cards for small purchases, you're starting to provide a long-term positive payment history to the 3 bureaus from 3 sources. As time goes by, on the credit card specifically, the bad credit cards will offer to up your credit limit. Some of those $250 credit cards will go up to $2,000. This is great news, and it's a sure sign what you're doing is working. When a credit card will no longer to offer to up your limit, so some of these $250 bad credit cards, after 2000, that's the limit to what that product will actually allow. Just go ahead and pay it off and put it away. You could even close the account if you're still quite a bit off from any kind of major purchase. You're going to want to now go back to creditcards.com and apply for a better card with a higher limit. Having cards with large limits and on-time payments is a sure sign you're a good person to lend to. So step 7, rebuilding your credit, cars. So car payments are another sure way to build your credit. But hold on a second. This can also be a huge disaster. Can you really afford that car? Let's talk about this, as this is one of the largest traps people fall into. If you buy a new or used car, just finance a portion of it using a local credit union, not the dealership. A small portion means 35% or less of the total value. If you buy a $5,500 car and finance $2,000 of it with a local credit union, you'll be making about an $85 payment each month towards it. As long as the interest rate is reasonable, and that's very up for discussion, say between 4 and 10%, this will help you get your credit moving significantly. Now, you may not get offered a great interest rate, but a credit union will certainly do the best they can for you. By doing this, now you've created a fourth type of credit for your credit score. While you may be paying interest on that $2,000, it's a further sign to credit bureaus and creditors that you're ready for a big purchase. Like a house or a condo. Some final thoughts. Don't sign for friends on their loans. Don't add a written statement to your credit report. Later, when your credit is good, it will still be there and raise red flags. If you were previously married or with a partner and still dealing with their debt, you should certainly seek some free legal advice. There are some things you can do to stop their past habits affecting your credit. And in general, if the situation gets very complicated or you feel like you owe a significant amount of money, seek out some free legal advice in your town. Certainly, if you're looking at bankruptcy or any of these other types of options, these free lawyers will definitely help you. And a letter from a lawyer to these credit bureaus, to these creditors, can have a lot more of a significant effect than you just working on it on your own. Well, thank you very much for listening to this workshop. Any kind of questions or any kind of follow-up, certainly shoot me a comment or an email. And again, talk to a local nonprofit or credit counseling agency. Start digging in, figure out where you are in the process, and think about what your goals are in the end.